and the video will be linked to the assignment. Okay, so during the lesson, I'm going to have you look at the shared screen because I have some pictures to show you. And I'm going to begin the lesson with an explanation of the vocabularies that will help you comprehend the lesson. And then I will talk to you about the medieval period or the Dark Age. Then I will talk to you about the birth of the Renaissance. Then I will talk to you about the end of the Dark Age. Then I will talk to you about the conclusion of this lesson. And then you will write your viewpoint by answering the question, how did the Renaissance change the Western world? Do you have any questions, students? Before I begin the lesson, do you have any questions? This lecture is due next Thursday. Next Thursday, you have two things due, the Cornell notes and this lecture. Do you have any questions, students? All right. So let me begin the lesson by having you look at the shared screen. And in the shared screen, you see a picture of me standing in Paris, France. And I'm standing in front of a monument in Paris. It's called the Arch of Triumph. And it was built by Napoleon. This arch is built in the classical tradition, the style of ancient Rome. During the Renaissance, ancient Greek and Roman culture revived, and it caused a renewal to learning and exploration that put the Western world on the path towards modernity. And so any understanding of world history must include the Renaissance. Now I'm going to go over the vocabulary words that you will hear me use in this lesson. And as you are taking notes, try not to copy word for word for word. Try to use your mind and put it into your own words. In this lesson, you're going to hear me use the word plague. The plague, the plague. The plague was also called the bubonic plague. It was also called the Black Death. So the plague, the bubonic plague, the Black Death, they refer to the same thing. In the Middle Age, diseases happen very often. And diseases happen in dirty, filthy places. Cities in the Middle Age were dirty. In the Middle Age in Europe were dirty and filthy. And diseases happen often. One of the deadliest diseases in the Middle Age was the plague. It was a bacterial disease that kills by fever, delirium, and pus would grow all over the body. You will hear me use the word Renaissance. Renaissance is French for rebirth. And the word Renaissance come to mean the period in Europe, in the Western world, between 1300 to 1500s, where ancient Greek and Roman learning and values appeared in arts, literature, academia, and popular culture. And the Renaissance would change medieval period, ending the so-called Dark Age and beginning a period of modernity in Europe. You will hear me use the word Moors. And again, the Moors were the Umayyad Muslims who ruled Spain from 750 to 1492. The Moorish kingdom was established by Abdul Rahman, the last Umayyad prince who fled Damascus that was overthrown by the Abbasids. You will hear me use the word classical antiquity. Classical antiquity is the study of ancient Greece and Rome. You will hear me use the word humanists. Humanists are people who use the techniques of ancient Greece and Rome to study their contemporary world. Using classical techniques like history, rational thought, and observing natural laws. You will hear me use the word humanism. Humanism was a movement during the Renaissance that was based on the belief that humans, rather than God, can achieve progress. So in the Renaissance, the focus was moved away from God and church to the ability of humans to achieve great things. And individualism developed during the Renaissance. Individualism, as opposed to the church or God, individualism is the belief that the individual has the power to achieve progress through hard work and intelligence. The individual can determine his fate through hard work and intelligence, rather than a reliance on God for destiny. You will hear me use the word secularism. Secularism is the focus on worldly matters, as opposed to a focus on biblical scriptures, or a focus on the church, or a focus on theology, or a focus on God as a way to win salvation. Secularism is the idea that the worldly matters can produce happiness in the present life, life on earth, and that happiness does not necessarily come after death in heaven. That happiness could be achieved on earth through focusing on worldly matters. You hear me use the word patronage. Patronage means support given by a person. So for example, if so-and-so supports me, if I'm an artist and I need to make a living as an artist by selling my art, if so-and-so purchases my art, if so-and-so orders my art, then that so-and-so supports my art. That support is known as patronage. Okay, so so-and-so is my patron, right? If Mr. So-and-so gives me a large amount of money to produce a work of art, a painting, if you will, then Mr. So-and-so is my patron. So patronage is the support by a person. You will hear me use the word neoclassical. Neo means new, neoclassical, new classical, neoclassical. The writings, the art, the architecture in the Renaissance that was based on the classical style, the ancient Greek and Roman style, are known as neoclassical. So if I am producing something in the style of the ancient Greeks, then that work is called neoclassical work. The original classical work from the ancient Greeks is called classical work. The original work from ancient Greece is called classical work. But the work that is produced during the Renaissance, based on the ancient Greek style, is called neoclassical. You will hear me use the word theology. Theology is the study of nature of God and religious belief. Theology was the basis of the medieval world. Life was based on the dictates of the Lord and the church, and church teaching was the basis of society. Theology was the basis of society in the medieval age. Theology would be replaced by humanism during the Renaissance. You will hear me use the word Western civilization. Western civilization is used to refer to countries that grew out of ancient Greece and Rome, like Britain, France, and then later the United States, Canada, Mexico, any countries whose government systems and laws can be traced back to ancient Greece and Rome is known as a Western country. And Western countries together make up Western civilization. Do you have any questions about these vocabulary words, students?
What about humanist? I really don't.
Humanist. Humanists. Humanists are people who use the techniques of ancient Greece and Rome in order to study their contemporary world. And the techniques of ancient Greece and Rome is history, rational thought, and observing natural laws. Any other questions, students?
Thank you.
Now I'm going to talk about the medieval period or the Dark Age. And I have a student trying to get in. That student was a drop and not a new entry, so I admitted the student. All right, now I'm going to talk about the medieval period or the Dark Age. Life in the Dark Age was very tough for people. For 5% of the people who are lucky enough to be born into a royal family or a landholding family, life is pretty comfortable. But even for those people, their life expectancy is expected to be at 31 years. The majority of the people, 95% of the people who own no land, like the peasants, the merchants, the artisans, the farmers, they depend on the lords for their livelihood, and the Lord have absolute power over them, absolute power over them, because these people entered into a contract with the Lord for the right to live on the Lord's land in exchange for absolute obedience. And so for the ordinary people in the Middle Age, what the Lord says is absolute rule. People were dependent on the landowner for their livelihood. And for these people, opportunities were little to none. The opportunities available to move ahead in life were little to none. The tools of opportunities, like education, was available to less than 5% of the population. Education was very expensive, and the feudal governments in the Middle Age did not build schools to educate people. So the majority of the people did not read or write. And if people did learn how to read or write in the Middle Age, they will read or write the vernacular, the common language. Vernacular. Did I go over vernacular with you guys? I feel like I might have skipped vernacular.
Yeah, you skipped it.
Okay, let me go over vernacular. I hate it when I do that. Did I even have vernacular on here?
No, you didn't, I think.
I don't even have vernacular on here. Okay, add vernacular. Vernacular is the language of the common people. You know, there's the language of the elite people in the Middle Age, and then there's a language of the common people in the Middle Age, right? So all over the Western world in the Middle Age, the language of the super rich, the super privileged, is the Latin language. That's the gateway language. Latin, the language of the ancient Romans. But for the majority of the people, it's the vernacular, right? Like English, for example, German, for example. Those are the language
Wait,
of the.
so you're saying all these languages are like for the poor people, like English and German?
Yeah, every single people in the civilized world, they have their own language, like Polish, German, Slavic, French, Spanish. These language were adopted from Latin, and over time, after 1,000 years, the language morphed into its own identity. And languages like English, Spanish, Italian, French, they are all a version of Latin. But over thousands of years, over 1,000 or so years, the language morphed into versions of its own. Like the English words, almost all of the English words, as well as Spanish words or French words, you can trace it back to Latin. But the original Latin, and that is the Latin that was not changed or added to, that original Latin was the language of the elite. is the language of learning, the language of religion, the church. While the majority of the people, they speak their own version of the original Latin, which by the time of the Middle Age was unrecognizable from the standpoint of ancient Rome. But the original Latin by the time of the Middle Age, unaltered, unchanged, was the language of the elite. And only 5% of the population knew Latin. The rest of the people, they spoke the vernacular. And so,
I have a question.
yeah,
Did the elite also learn vernacular? Like they could understand it or no?
yeah, the elite understand the vernacular. They speak the vernacular. They speak the vernacular in their day-to-day regular life, but they know Latin, and they use Latin to communicate with one another. All of the books in the Middle Age were written in Latin. Everything was written in Latin in the Middle Age. All of the
So the vernacular was like meant for the common people, right?
vernacular is meant for the common people,
Okay.
and the common people do not know.
Any Latin at all,
Do
right?
not know any Latin at all in the Middle Age.
They not know any either, right? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because the feudal government in the Middle Age do not build schools. The last time that a European king built schools was Charlemagne. That was the last time that he built schools. Under Charlemagne, schools were built all around his empire to teach literacy, to teach Latin. Charlemagne created a handwriting system. Charlemagne had his monks translate Greek and Roman works. But after Charlemagne died, he died in the I think in the year 960. After Charlemagne died, schools were no longer built by the feudal governments because Europe plunged into constant warfare between the three regions that used to be a part of Charlemagne's empire, that were inherited by his three sons. And then that down through the centuries, those regions would continue to fight with one another. And then with the Vikings invasion of Europe and Viking control of Normandy, and ultimately descendants of Viking control of England, warfare between France and England over Normandy continued for over 100 years. And so constant warfare and the rise of Christianity made the building of schools in Europe virtually halted. And so that all over Europe, the ordinary people, received no education. And so as a result, people were dependent for knowledge on the elite, like the church. In the Middle Age, the church occupies the highest level in society, or the lords. And information is power. In the Middle Age, people suffered by famine, by disease, by abuse of the Lord, who rule with absolute power, or the abuse of the kings who ruled with absolute power. And 95% of the people who are the backbone of the feudal economy suffered the most. They suffered disease. In Middle Age Europe, cities were dirty, filthy. Northern Europe rained constantly in the winter, snow, muddy, filthy. Rats thrive in filthy, dirty conditions. And rats carry diseases. European cities lacked sewage to take trash out of the city. So people lived next to trash, next to feces and urine. And so as a result, people in the Middle Age in Europe were constantly afflicted by disease, like the flu, the measles, chickenpox, pneumonia, and especially the plague. And all of these diseases, they thrive in filthy conditions. Climate change happened in the Middle Age. This is one of the reasons that people in the East, like the Mongols, migrated over to Europe to look for greener pastures. And climate change causes famine. And people are constantly threatened by famine. Ordinary family who relied on crops in order to pay bills to the duke or the lord often find themselves impoverished as a result of famine. People were expected to endure suffering in life, and it was believed that suffering was a natural part of life, that the endurance of suffering was seen as a test for salvation. People expected that true happiness could be achieved in the afterlife, the life after death. But that happiness can only come through salvation, through the sacraments of the church. Because people could not relate to God on their own. God's teaching in the Bible could only be read by those who could read Latin, and those were the church officials. And people who would want to be saved, people who want to live in the ways of God, could not live in the ways of God because they could not read the Bible on their own. The Bible was written in Latin. So people cannot perform sacraments on their own. People had to go to the church in order to receive sacraments from the church, because the church can interpret the Bible. Church officials can read the Bible that is written in Latin. So people go to the church constantly to listen to the priests preach in the vernacular after interpreting the Bible written in Latin. So people were dependent on the church for interpretation of the Bible and for the sacraments that can only be delivered through the church because the church understood Latin. So people in the Middle Age were dependent on their Lord and dependent on the church. The people in the Middle Age were dependent on the Lord for their present life, the life on earth, and they were dependent on the church for the life after they die. And there's nothing they can do in this life to improve their lives, to improve their circumstance. They can't go to school to become a professional. They can't work hard to become a lord. Once they are born into a peasant family, they're going to stay a peasant for the rest of their life. Once they are born into a farmer's family, they're going to stay a farmer for the rest of their life. They can't go to school to become a royal. They cannot go to school to become a lord. They cannot go to school to receive a title. All of those good things in life, all of those good things in life that give privilege, the 5%, their privilege, they are all inheritance passed down from one generation to the next. And the rest of the people struggle to eke by day to day, expected to suffer in this life. And in fact, suffering is natural, a natural part of life. And suffering could not be done away with by human abilities. That it was God's will for people to suffer in this life as penance for the sins of Adam and Eve. So life in the Western world was miserable. People lived to about 31. If they're lucky, but the majority of the people don't make it to 31. We live to about 70 or 80, you and I. You're expected to live to 80 years. But if you were living in the middle age, you're expected to die by the time you're 30. And that's life in feudal Europe in the Middle Age. Life in the Western world was miserable for people. Contrast that to life in the Islamic world. Life was better for people in the Islamic world. People in the Islamic world suffered less disease. Cities were cleaner. Life in the Islamic world was more comfortable due to technology like sewage, irrigation. And people could read and write and learn in the Islamic world. And so as a result of social advancement and learning, the Islamic world surpassed the Western world. Now I'm going to talk about the birth of the Renaissance. Do you have any questions, students? Now I'm going to talk about the birth of the Renaissance.
Mr. Tran, I have a question.
Yes.
How do we paraphrase in our own words of the part Latin, church authority, sacraments, papal supremacy, corruption?
Well, the sacraments was a way to win salvation, and only the church can perform sacraments. And what are sacraments? Sacraments are baptism, funerals, marriages, confessions, mass. Only the church can perform these things. And only the church can perform these things because the church can read Latin. Do you have any other questions?
That's it. Thank you.
I'm going to talk about the birth of the Renaissance. So in the Western world, people heard about life in the Islamic world. Europeans knew about life in the Islamic world because Europeans brought stories about the Islamic world back from the Crusades. 4 Crusades were fought between Christians and Muslims. And those Christians who returned from the Islamic world brought knowledge and information about the Islamic world. And in times of warfare, and disease, Europeans knew that hospitals and medical advancements were available for care in the Islamic world. So Europeans visited hospitals to seek treatment and operations. There was no medicine in the Western world during the Middle Age. There was no operation. In the ancient Greek and Roman period, the ancient Greeks operated on individuals. Medicine was performed in ancient Greece. But during the Dark Age, none of that. In the Dark Age in Europe, you'd have to pray for health. If you're sick, you pray. If your dad is sick, the entire family would come to the bedside and pray. And only through prayer can recovery be achieved. But many Europeans found that even prayer could not save a life. And Europeans traveled to Islamic cities to receive medical treatment, operations, and even eye care. Even eye care. Muslims performed eye care, can improve visions. And starting in the days of Charlemagne, Europeans knew that universities and libraries in the Islamic world contain ancient Greek and Roman manuscripts. And so even after Charlemagne died, when Europeans rejected ancient Greek and Roman knowledge, many Europeans continued to travel to Muslim universities and libraries to study there. And alongside scholars from all around the world in the other civilizations, the Asian civilizations in China, in India, in Persia, studying side by side in Islamic universities and libraries. A lot of these Europeans brought back knowledge to the European world. Brought back knowledge and brought back manuscripts from Plato or Socrates, for example. A lot of Europeans traded with the Islamic world. A lot of European merchants traded with merchants in the Islamic world. And trade with the Islamic world, as well as China, for example, on the Silk Road, was very lucrative. And people found that they can become very wealthy by importing goods produced in the Islamic world and in Asia, like silk or spice. So the Islamic world became the source of learning and technology and medicine for the Europeans of the Dark Age. And the Islamic world, the trade with the Islamic world, enabled people with no title, no inheritance, to become very wealthy. Importing goods from the Islamic world and then selling it in the European market. In the 1300s, some Europeans found new opportunities for social mobility or opportunities to become wealthy. Because in the 1300s, 3 plagues happened in Europe, and it happened only in Europe. It did not happen in the Middle East. It did not happen in the Islamic world. 3 plagues happened in Europe. One in 1348. I'm sorry, 4 plagues. One in 1348, one in 1362, one in 1368, and one in 1381. These 4 plagues wiped out 60% of the population. Now, it happened in Europe because Europe was colder. Cities in Europe was dirty. It didn't happen in Islamic cities because Islamic cities were warmer and they were cleaner. 60% of the population was wiped out. Survivors found opportunities, and ordinary people found opportunities to become wealthy. Following the plague, cities that were closest to the Islamic world became very wealthy, and they managed to break away from the power of Rome or the power of the Vatican, and they became independent of the Holy Roman Empire. Cities like Milan, that was within the territories of the Holy Roman Empire, cities like Milan, Genoa, Florence. These cities wrestled themselves away from the Holy Roman Empire and became independent as a result of their wealth. These cities are close to the Muslim world, and they also are a part of the classical heritage. Florence, Milan, Genoa. These are cities on the Mediterranean Peninsula, and these people live among the ruins of ancient Rome. And they can travel to ruins in ancient Greece fairly easily. And these cities found themselves becoming very wealthy after the plague. And I'm going to talk about Florence as an example. If you want to know what Florence looks like, this is what Florence looks like. Here I am in Florence. This is what Florence looks like. I'm standing over the city of Florence. The Renaissance happened in Florence first, as artists began to build art, create art in the classical style to decorate the city of Florence. Now, if you look at this picture, these are neoclassical art decorating Florence. Over time, Florence came to be ruled in the 1300s by a family who held no titles. This family did not inherit land from the king. This family did not own a duchy. This family was a part of the common people, was a part of the 95%. The Medici family was a common family. And after the plague, the Medici family became very, very rich through their own merit, through their own hard work. For example, Cosimo de' Medici, the founder of the Medici Bank, grew rich by his own hard work and intelligence. After the plague, people needed to recover, and Cosimo de' Medici provided the funds. He established the Medici Bank. that became very successful, and the Medici Bank became very, very rich. So rich that Cosimo de' Medici used the money to buy politicians in Florence. And the politicians in Florence was in the pocket of Cosimo de' Medici. And so Cosimo de' Medici became the dictator of Florence. And this is an ordinary man. This man held no title. He held he is not the owner of a duchy. He is not the duke of a fiefdom. He is not a vassal of a king. Just an ordinary man. After Cosimo de' Medici died, his grandson inherited the business. And if I'm showing you pictures on the screen. And I'm showing you a picture of Giovanni de' Medici. This is the grandson of Cosimo de' Medici. Giovanni de' Medici furthered the family business by making the Medici Bank the Bank of the Vatican. Now, to be the Bank of the Vatican, first of all, it is such a contradiction because, usury, right, in Christendom is not allowed. And here is a bank that loans money. And second, the Vatican occupies the highest position in the Western world. So to be the banker of the Vatican is a very high status. It's a very high status honor for the Medici Bank. And soon the Medici Bank would become the banker of Europe. People would go to the Medici Bank to borrow money. The Medici family sought to expand their power by controlling the Vatican. The Medici family put 4 of its members into the Vatican as popes. 4 members of the Medicis became popes. One of the most infamous and corrupted pope from the Medici family was Giovanni de' Medici, who became Pope Leo X. His corruption would launch Martin Luther's rebellion known as the Reformation. And I'll talk about the Reformation in a separate lesson. Let me look at the time. 11:38. What time do we finish? Let me look at the clock.
11:45.
We finish at 11:45. Thank you. 11:45, 11:38.
You got 7 minutes left.
Thank you so much. And so Giovanni de' Medici wanted to show off the power of his family. And so he patronized artists who can produce statues in the classical style. These artists that the Medici family hired, that Giovanni de' Medici hired, included Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and Raphael to produce classical works of art, to decorate the city of Florence in order to show off to the rest of the Western world the power of the Medici family, to show off that, yes, this city of commoners, of landless people, of titleless people can rule the world. And so these artists searched for inspiration from the ancient world. But there was no inspiration to be found for centuries. Ancient Greek and Roman manuscripts were destroyed or hidden or buried away somewhere deep in the monasteries. And all these artists could see were the contemporary work, such as this. I'm showing you a picture of a typical contemporary contemporary means the typical art of the day. This is the typical art of the day. You look at the images, they're flat, two-dimensional. The subject is Jesus. The subject is Jesus. And Jesus is being arrested by the Romans. This is Jesus being arrested by the Romans, probably after the Last Supper, when he was betrayed by Judas, and now he's about to be executed on the cross. But you notice the blend style, two-dimensional style, simple style of the Middle Age, and these artists who were hired by Giovanni de' Medici to produce classical art had nowhere to go for inspiration except for the Islamic libraries, the Islamic universities, or go to the people who had visited the Islamic libraries and universities, who had brought back some books from the ancient world, or to go to places where ancient works of arts were hidden away. And so, vis-a-vis ancient Greek and Roman work, vis-a-vis the Islamic world, made its way back to Europe and into the hands of artists like Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, who studied works of antiquity, such as this. I'm showing you an example of a work of antiquity. This is a statue of an Olympian. The ancient Greeks, they celebrated the human potential. The ancient Greeks, like Homer, wrote stories about heroes who overcame great odds to achieve great things. That humans have the ability to change the world. Through intelligence and hard work and competition, the best among humans can emerge. That's why the ancient Greeks invented the Olympics, where human potential can mingle in the same place, in competition, in the spirit of the human, in the power of the human potential. And that power is represented by these statues that glorify the human body. And people like Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci studied ancient Greeks of art. And then later on, other people studied classical culture, antiquity, architectures of antiquity, like the ancient Colosseum or the Parthenon. And so, inspired by these classical work, these artists produce neoclassical work. This is an example of a neoclassical work. I'm showing you an example of a neoclassical work. We get out 11:45, you said, is that correct?
Yeah, it's 11:45.
Okay, this is the time that we finish. And so I will delay the exit ticket. This lecture is due next Thursday. And the Cornell Notes students, don't wait on the Cornell Notes. Get on it right away. I highly recommend that you get on it right away. It is due next Thursday, and I will finish this lesson on Monday. Do you have any questions? Any questions at all? Okay. With that, I will say bye to you. You have a great weekend. I will see you on Monday.
Hi.
Bye.
Take care. No exit ticket.